Welcome, folks, to Digital Drams. Great to see you all. My name's Luke. I'm the W Club manager here at the Whisky shop. So yeah, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we want these tastings to be as interactive as possible. Get your questions, tasting notes, everything into the message meeting chat. Wow, brain's not working today. And at the end of the tasting, we'll be giving out a 15% discount on all the SKUs tried tonight, so that you can purchase one at a discount rate, your favorite ones, all of them if you want. So anyway, that's enough chit chat for me. Luke, do you want to introduce yourself and the running order for tonight for the whiskies, and then we can get started from there?
Thank you very much, Luke. You don't have to remember too many more names tonight, just Luke will do. So my name's Luke. I am one of the national account managers and sort of part-time brand ambassador for CVH Spirits. I say part-time brand ambassador because all of our national account managers tend to be very, very well trained on the whiskies, the distilleries and things like that. Just so we can, well, I suppose, go to all these wonderful tastings and get a little bit of knowledge behind us. CVH Spirits used to be Distill International, and we've just recently changed that name in the past year, all to do with the fact that the South African side of the business, which is based in South Africa, obviously, was purchased by Heineken Beverages. Heineken Beverages didn't want anything to do with Scotch whisky, so we are basically independent once more, known as CVH Spirits now, and we are the custodians of Bunnahabhain Distillery, Deanston Distillery, and Tobermory Distillery on Mull. So we've got three wonderful distilleries there, all very, very different, all very, very unique, and they've all got something to offer, I think. And I think some of you hopefully have been to some of my tastings before with the W Club. I had our master blender Julianne with me last time, doing Tobermory and Deanston previously before that. And tonight we get to do Bunnahabhain. You may have noticed that Bunnahabhain tastings are few and far between, and there's several reasons for that. Bunnahabhain sells itself. It is one of the sort of crown jewels in the whiskey world, and that's not my words; those are the words of the people that come and purchase the whiskey from the shop, and everyone kind of looks forward to Bunnahabhain releases. And also, we have very limited liquid coming out of Bunnahabhain because of its popularity. So it is an absolute privilege to be able to come on here tonight and walk you through some of our different releases over the past couple of years, including some stuff that's just been released in the past couple of months. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Marvelous. So do we have, obviously we've got the 12-year-old cask strength, the Feis Ile Canasta cask, Feis Ile Ruby Port cask, and the Toiteach A Dha. Is it? What do you pronounce
Toiteach A Dha. We'll go into lots of different Gaelic names, usually with Bunnahabhain, but luckily there's just one difficult one tonight, and that's Toiteach A Dha. The order is,
so is that the order we want to run in, or?
The order is going to be the 12-year-old, then the 12-year-old cask strength, and then we're going to go into the Ruby Port cask, and then into the Feis Ile Canasta cask, and then we'll finish with the Toiteach A Dha. And the Toiteach A Dha will finish with mainly because it's peated.
Marvelous. I'm just going to stick that into the chat so everyone can have a reference point for pouring and getting ready. So yeah, as you said, this is your third time on. It's great to we love a repeat guest here, we need to do something like an American talk show where we can play clips of like the last time you were on, and an update.
Picture McCullen's matchup.
Yeah. And as we were mentioning just before we started, I don't know if there is anyone. If you are, let me know in the chat, because it was a couple of years ago. But my very first tasting with the Whisky shop hosting one of these digital drams was with Bunnahabhain, back in January of 2022. It was on Burns Night, so that was good fun. But yeah, we'll get started, I suppose, on the Bunna 12. Will we?
I mean, hopefully, and usually, everyone's had a Bunnahabhain 12 before. And the reason why I put this into this tasting is with this particular whiskey, hopefully you should be familiar. If you're not, you will get very familiar with it. Please do just keep it to one side and don't drink it all in one go, because I want to refer back to it as we go through the different whiskies this evening, particularly when we've got a cask strength 12-year-old right next to it from 2023. Things at Bunnahabhain are just moving very, very swiftly and very, very cleanly towards sort of green energy and the way that the things that we do things at Bunnahabhain without trying to affect the process that creates this particular dram. This is the benchmark for everything we do at Bunnahabhain. This is the benchmark for the sort of flavor profile and what you think about Bunnahabhain. And when we talk about Bunnahabhain, we're talking about that unpeated, super sherried Islay whiskey, compared to the rest of the folks on the island, which are usually producing things at very high ppms of phenols and smoke and medicinal flavorings and all that sort of stuff coming off there. You're going to get something completely different with Bunnahabhain for those that haven't been there before. And just get your nose straight in there. You're going to pick up those really, really sweet sherry notes. You're going to pick up a little bit of vanilla. You're going to pick a little bit of caramel. And with this particular whiskey, it's one of our core range, and everything that's in our core range from CB8 Spirits is at 46.3%. That's where we think the sweet spot is. You're getting plenty of liquid alcohol in there to complement the flavors that we picked up from the various casks. With Bunnahabhain 12, as with 97% of everything from Bunnahabhain, we are in first fill Oloroso casks. Now, the Oloroso casks that we get are very, very high quality. We spend a lot of time and a lot of money investing in those casks, and we know that this is the signature and what people expect from Bunnahabhain. So that's your starter for this evening. But like I said, do keep some to one side because it's nice to go back to that Bunnahabhain 12. On the taste, you're going to get those, really, really big caramel notes, a lot of sweetness to it, a little bit of vanilla. You are going to get some, dried fruits, those raisins and dates in there. And it is a really, really long finish. And one thing I would note about the finish, it's just my tasting notes on it. It sits there for such a long time. You're going to have what I call the Bunnahabhain har. It feels really, really thick and just kind of gets right in the sinuses and sits there for quite a long period of time. And this is a signature of Bunnahabhain Spirit as well. Bunnahabhain Spirit is a very, very heavy spirit. We've got these massive teardrop stills, the biggest stills in Scotland, at 44,000 litres for the wash still and 22,000 litres for the spirit still. And those line arms are pointing downwards. So we're getting really heavy, oily spirit. And you can see that if you run it around the inside of your glass. It sticks there for a long time, those long legs taking a long time to dribble down the side of the glass. This is, luckily for me, the easiest thing in the world to sell. Nearly every pub in Scotland has it on its back bar, and there's a reason for it. We're not a huge company, but the liquid speaks for itself. And I hope you all agree that this is a firm favourite, usually on any whiskey shelf.
Oh yeah, it is an absolutely gorgeous dram. Frank D says, familiar rich sherry on the nose. I actually didn't realise, goes to show you, no matter how many times you do these again, I didn't realize they were the biggest stills in Scotland. That's quite impressive.
It's one of those lines that comes out most likely the lines like we've got the oldest distillery in Scotland and we've got the biggest stills and all that sort of stuff. So whilst we do have the biggest stills in terms of capacity, they're only half charged, which leaves a lot of room for copper contact within those stills. So we're probably doing about 2.2 million litres of pure alcohol a year at Bunnahabhain. So you're working seven days a week, 24 hours a day with those massive stills, but only half charged. Otherwise, we'd be right up there. And there is only two pair. And, we're not absolutely pumping through the stuff. It's just very, very heavy liquid produced in very big stills. So that's why you still get, even though you got those downward facing line arms, it's not being refluxed in there as much as something with an upwards pointing on line arm. The space that it's got in there to condense and come back down is absolutely massive, and that's why Bunnahabhain is still, quite smooth for a spirit that's got a downwards pointing line arm. And that heavy spirit works so well with those sherry casks. You will get a little bit of saline in there. I'm not going to go with the marketing line. That's because it's produced by the sea. It is just a characteristic of Bunnahabhain spirit. We do mature quite a lot of our spirit at Bunnahabhain, but some of it gets matured at Deanston and elsewhere. So we've got the saline in there is a spirit characteristic rather than by the sea. I'm not going to pretend that everyone thinks that that's the situation.
Yeah, well, no, I mean we're well-educated consumers here on the whiskey shop at the W Club, so we know.
No, I've been caught out on that one before a long time ago, and never again.
Yeah, look, I find saline amazing as a kind of tasting note within a whiskey, because obviously there's no salt content in there, measurable. So those kind of flavors that are coming through are coming from other elements that our mouth is kind of you probably know the technical term better than me, Luke, that's picking up as kind of that saltiness, which to me is more interesting than if it was actually being imparted by the wind or the rain or whatever.
And it was just, it'll be partly to do with the casks that we're choosing. It'll partly be mostly to do with the production of the spirit. When you're in those stills and when you're in the washbacks and things like that, they're picking up different characteristics. We're wooden washbacks at Bunnahabhain. So what you're getting there is lots of different infections and things like that. I'm not supposed to use the word infections, but you know exactly what I mean when I talk about that. And long fermentations in there as well. So you are just picking up loads and loads of different characteristics over that slightly slower process and allowing that spirit to become a little bit more interesting.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. Kirsty says it's heavy, maybe, but so quaffable. Frank says ideal dram for New Year's Eve and a slice of Christmas cake. Couldn't agree more, Frank. And yeah, it's interesting because we've had a lot of our recent single malts. Maybe people would could give their own opinion on this in the chat who've been on our recent tastings. There's been a lot of that kind of familiar, really orchard fruity character coming from the spirit. And that's not as present in that. As you say, there's that saline notes, this kind of there's a lot heavier notes. Even though, as you say, it's unique for being an unpeated Islay, it doesn't have a lot of those other almost cliched now characteristics that you get from these kind of stills with high reflux and kind of the really kind of fruity characteristic that comes off a lot of modern stills. Do you think that is down to the size of the stills, or is it down to that wash that you were saying, or?
It'll be a bit of both. Just to give Deanston as an example, we're probably fermented out the alcohol at 48 hours at Deanston, but we do up to 84 hours fermentation, and you get those really sort of tropical banana, pineapples sort of coming off the wash then. And then that obviously then going into the stills for distillation, where at Deanston it's a line arm that's flat. And there's an onion on the stills at Deanston. So you're getting a lot of different kinds of reflux going on. And it is a mixture of, what you're doing in that fermentation process and then what you're doing in the distillation process afterwards. At Bunnahabhain, it's up to 108 hours fermentation going on there. So it's a really, really long fermentation at Bunnahabhain. And then you're doing these half-charged distillations, which means there's just lots of copper to come in contact with, because it's in the shape of an onion that comes up the way. And it's a teardrop almost shaped, not onion shaped, that's Deanston, teardrop shape. And that gives a lot of copper contact and a lot of reflux in its own special way. But as soon as it gets to the top, it's going down into the condenser and we're getting that really lovely heavy spirit out of it. So it will be a mixture of those two things. You'll know from having other conversations with other distilleries, especially some of the slightly older ones, the way that those stills are built is usually to fit a building that was already there. We're in a unique situation usually on Islay where actually we've built the buildings to the size of the stills because they've always been distilleries. And that makes a difference as well. And it produces, otherwise all whiskey would be the same. And everything would taste the same. And obviously that's not the case in terms of spirit characteristic.
Yeah, well, the building and that's, I think, it'd be good to come back to. I wouldn't normally move this quickly on from the first dram, but I'm just conscious of what you said about wanting to keep it as a reference point. So I'm worried if we're sitting there longer, people might empty their glass. So if people are comfortable, we could not finish this, but park this and come back to it. Does that sound good, Luke? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to use it in the next tasting anyway, because you're all quite lucky to have next to you, which is a very rare occasion, I'm sure, in whiskey tastings, to have obviously the core favorite, the Bunnahabhain 12, sat right next to a limited release, which is Bunnahabhain 12 Cask Strength 2023. So every batch of Bunnahabhain 12 is obviously then added water to bring it down to that 46.3%. What we've done here is provide you last year's batch without any water added to it. So you can actually really compare these two drams side by side. Now, for the cask strength editions, we've done 3 of these now, 2021, 22, and 23. And all of them have been slightly different ABVs because it's all about getting those flavor profiles right for when it's reduced down to 46.3% and making sure that it's consistent. So at CVH Spirits, none of our whiskies have any color added. They're all non-chill filtered, so you don't lose any mouthfeel, you don't lose any of that color from it. But it does mean you will get some batch variation in terms of color. And we don't worry about color, we worry about flavor. All the whiskies are blended and tasted in blue glassware by the blending team. So they're not tasting with their eyes, they're tasting with their taste buds and their noses. And you get to sit here now and go side by side with these two particular drams. just before you stick your nose in there and take a deep inhale, this is at 60%, 60.1%. Last year's one was at 58.6, and the year before that was at 57.4, I think it was. So you can see how much effort goes into the blending process to get that consistent 12-year-old profile before we add the water. And obviously, it's got to end up as 12-year-old at the end of the day. So we've taken some of that liquid, we've not added water, we've put it straight into a bottle, and you're just going to get something that's a little bit different and a little bit more ridiculous in terms of Bunnahabhain and its sherryness. And the fun experiment here is get your nose in there, have a wee taste at cask strength, keep adding water to it. You can bring it down as close as possible. See if any of you can get it to match the 12-year-old that you've got next to you, if you're feeling adventurous and feel like you can be a blender. But yeah, it's very rare that I think we all get to taste these things side by side when you've got a 12-year-old and a 12-year-old cask strength. So yeah, that's why I brought it along tonight, just to give you guys an insight into what it is we do.
No, totally. I mean, the straight away for me, the nose is like totally different. You wouldn't have guessed it was even the same kind of basic components. I mean, the same whiskey, not a cask strength. While people nose away there and get their tasting notes prepped, there's actually a couple of comments on the 12 I missed, and I forgot to give you the price, folks. So the 12 Bunna 12 is 55 quid. This is the first one, not the cask strength. Before the discount. With the discount, it is 46 quid, so not bad. And then the cask strength, this one is a bit more, so it's 88. We before the discount. So Melissa just finished a bottle of this a couple of weeks back. Very nice. This is going back to the 12, not the cask strength. Honeysuckle, salt, brine came through long after the taste. Frank says Bunna 12 is one of those familiar malts that feels like an old friend every time you go back to it. 100%. Alistair says got a nose like a crunchy chalk bar, and that's on this cask strength, and that is, I think that's a tremendous tasting note for
it's a very good tasting note. And we were talking about salt and saline before. I think you really do pick up that kind of almost like salted caramel is what I get from it on the taste and on the nose. You're just getting a lot more saline through there, and it just shows, as soon as you're adding water to these things, you're opening up those oils that are maybe slightly richer. You're not getting so much sort of heavy sherry and dates and things like that. You're getting a lot more of the sort of lighter caramels and almost a little bit of cream to it as well. For something that's 60%, yeah, you can feel the alcohol in it, but you wouldn't necessarily pin 60% as a figure on there.
Yeah, no, 100%. Which Kirsty agrees with. It's scarily smooth for cask strength, even at 60% odd. It's easy drinking, and Chet is amazing. I think I like it too much. No, it's tremendous. I haven't actually taken a sip yet, but
cask strength Bunnahabhains, they're few and far between, and only those that really go to the distillery and go on your warehouse 9 tours around there, which I'm sure some of the people in this chat have been on. That's where you're getting your cask strength Bunnahabhains, and it's really nice to be able to give this as an offering. Please do watch our special releases this year, because there is a special cask strength coming out, which is slightly older, but hopefully you guys get a chance to grab a bottle. And we're just realizing that sort of quite literally raw potential within Bunnahabhain to be at cask strength and be a very, very pleasant dram at the same time. I can't say that that's the same for every whiskey, but Bunnahabhain really does hold up in its spirit characteristic. Being that heavier liquid, definitely sort of tones down the alcohol feel in the mouth, and it just really, really sort of sits there quite nice, and you've got that sort of creamy effect to it. I think it's just, I don't know, wonderful to taste them side by side and have a wee comparison. And it sort of gives you an education in yourself to figure out what we mean when we say cask strength and what we mean when we say nominated strength.
Yeah, no, 100%. I was just looking around there to see if I could see some of the releases I got when I was visiting Bunnahabhain. I thought they were in this room, but maybe they're not. Maybe I drank them. They were the distillery exclusive Manthania cask. Phenomenal stuff. It's a great distillery, definitely one to visit on Islay. It's a bit out of the way compared to some of the ones that are easier to visit around Port Ellen and Bowmore, but it's worth the trip out. I'm sure you'll agree, Luke.
Absolutely. I was very privileged this year to go along to Feis Ile, the whiskey festival in Islay. For Bunnahabhain Day, I was taking some customers, your colleague actually, Sarah Chang, along to the distillery, but we went by boat, much more civilized. Bunnahabhain famously has a jetty jutting out from it, and that until 1997, basically everything used to arrive by sea. There is a dirt track there now, but it's barely a road, and you wouldn't believe it that we put HGVs down there full of whiskey and casks and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it is probably the most difficult distillery to get to, but well worth the trip, I have to say, especially just for the view.
I share a desk with Sarah, and she never mentioned this, so I might have to have words with her. But no, but it's yeah. I haven't been out for Feis Ile, but it's definitely one I would love to get to. I hear the Bunnahabhain Day is phenomenal. I don't know if I mentioned this in a previous tasting. My fiance now, I was going to say I don't know, girlfriend or whatever, partner, but the she used to work for Deanston back in the day, and she used to do they'd obviously draft staff from other parts of the company to help man Bunnahabhain on Feis Ile, and it was her highlight of working there. She did it 2 or 3 times, and absolutely loved it. Raves about it. So it's a phenomenal distillery. I can see Ian is currently coming to us from outside the gates of Bunnahabhain. So the weather's holding up well there.
There's better photos.
Because this is the other thing about it. You mentioned the amazing journey. The location's brilliant. Looking over the Paps of Jura and all that. I was down there. I wasn't actually at Bunna, but I was on Ardnahoe a couple of weeks ago with Whiskeria. And it was, so we're obviously just about a mile down the same coast. And that part is amazing. Having said that, the distillery is, and I believe there's obviously a reason for this, which you might share with us. It is literally like walking into a prison.
So I think the term is brutalist, even though it's 1881, and it's probably literally to do with the fact that as the distillery has grown over time, particularly in sort of the 1900s, it's needed to expand and cheapest available resources to make them. But what we're trying to do with that particular site, you'll notice there's a lot less warehousing now at Bunnahabhain, and that's because those slightly cheaper warehouses that were built were not up to scratch, and we did sadly have to knock them down. But that means we've managed to consolidate what it is we do have there. Some of the storage of the casks is now off-site, mainly at Deanston. And if any of you have been to Deanston Distillery, you'll see how vast the warehouses are behind the distillery there. It's actually quite weird. You kind of look at the distillery from the front and don't realize how much is actually behind, and considering it goes into a hill as well. But at Bunnahabhain, it's quite, and this is strange to say about something that's 1881. It's quite possibly one of our most modern distilleries within Scotland at this moment in time, and that's to do with the fact that we are very much pushing our green credentials at this point. So we have a biomass generator at Bunnahabhain. So all the draff, the waste from that spent malt, goes to the generator, is burned and turned into hot water for steam, for charging stills and things like that, and steaming stills. We also use some wood chips from a nearby forest, which we replenish as well. So we're well on our way to that green distillery as much as possible, and trying to get it to be that slightly ahead of the curve in terms of the whiskey industry, which is a very carbon heavy industry, but we're doing our bit to try and drive that sustainability factor with Bunnahabhain. We've got much systems in there that make it more efficient. It's very computer powered now compared to Deanston, which is all levers and pulleys. So it's interesting at Bunnahabhain at this moment in time. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on, and considering how remote it is, it's actually amazing what they managed to achieve in such a short period of time and making that place, sort of a beacon of what a Scotch whisky distillery can be.
Oh, fantastic. And it is fantastic. I believe you invested a lot of money in a new distillery centre there just after COVID or during COVID.
Yeah, so we've got the new visitor centre there. And if you ask me, it should have been twice the size, but that's me. But it's...
I did think someone had given me a figure on what it cost, and I was like, I mean, it's cool, but really, I thought from what I was told, it would be bigger.
I think a lot of that cost is getting materials, resources, and workers to try and actually build such a facility. Speak to our colleagues at Ardnahoe, and they'll tell you all about that sort of process of getting people to build a distillery using just a dirt track. But no, the reason why we've invested there is just to raise its profile a little bit. I think Bunnahabhain in the past, whilst everyone knows the liquid, visiting the distillery compared to how easy it is to access all the other distilleries in Islay is quite tricky. And I think we just wanted to make it a lovely, welcoming place. We've kept the main things that are all whiskey related, including Warehouse 9. But we installed quite a modern distillery visitor centre there with a lovely veranda. You can sit out and have a dram on and watch over Bunnahabhain Bay And if you just need to follow someone like David Brody on Twitter, and he'll puts up the view from the veranda every morning, whether it's rain or shine. And honestly, even if it is raining, it's still quite beautiful down there.
Yeah, no, certainly. On the architecture, my understanding was, maybe this was apocryphal when I visited there, that the original designer had actually also designed a bunch of Victorian prisons, and that it was within that sort of that was his kind of frame of reference for building, basically.
I've not actually heard that one, but it could well be true. It could well be
But you know,
true.
the whiskey industry is full of these kind of stories that maybe when you poke at them a bit, maybe it's true. I don't know. Maybe have an old look around online after this. We've got some tremendous comments in here though on this. Some fantastic tasting notes. So I'm rude of us to neglect them, because there's some brilliant input here. Frank D has said the cask strength is like Bunna for adults, which is
I like that one.
agree. X-rated Bunna. Loving the CS12, really full flavor profile with a splash of water. I just added a bit of water to myself, and it really does open it up. And I'm a big fan of drinking straight out the cask strength, but it's good. Ian says I got them last year when I visited, which may be a reference to some of those distillery releases. John B said, not sure if I've ever had a Bunna, but 12-year-old cask strength is super. Mel has got some tremendous taste notes here, which is kind of put words to what I was searching for while we were chatting there when I was sipping away. It's stout beer, strong fresh coffee, undiluted blackcurrant juice. Then the heat at the back of the mouth is totally right. I mean, when someone who I can't remember who was mentioned further up about the crunchy, I was like, yeah, but it's chocolate adjacent. It's like that honeycomb and chocolate or country beer, but it's honeycomb with something that's slightly chocolate adjacent. And I thought, well, not quite coffee, but strong beer, like a good strong stout, even if it's not officially a chocolate stout, should have those kind of chocolatey malt notes, and it definitely. Well, that's a great tasting note. Richard says the 12-year-old Caston is great, salted caramel nuts on the palate for me. Bob said this one is core 12 dialed up to 10. Got the 2021 on the shelf, fab. Caramel and licorice more prominent on the Caston 12, says Frank. With enough water, I got the nose the same. This is to try and dilute them down to be equal. With enough water, I got the nose the same as the 12, but tasted a bit too watered down. I won't give up my day job just yet. That's Nick there. Says Frank D says I thought this the exact same, probably because it's so rich without the water, but it doesn't actually need that much. Says Nick. It also could be dependent on I mean, obviously they use like filtered deionized water or whatever to dilute these things, or they say they do anyway. So maybe it is also your tap water, Nick. Maybe you actually have the talent. It's just this, too much mineral content or fluoride or something in there. Any thoughts on that, Luke? On those fantastic tasting notes and feedback?
I'm actually really enjoying the undiluted blackcurrant juice comment, because that is such a strong flavor, and it's clicked in my head, and I'm sure it's clicked in a few others as well. Obviously Mel there as well. And it's not something I would normally think about when you're thinking about Bunnahabhain blackcurrants, but we did talk about, dried fruits before, and if you're getting that cask strength, we're not quite down at that richness yet. We're still a little bit at the sort of almost tannic end of what it is to be a Bunnahabhain in a sherry cask. So it's it's really interesting notes. And then Nick, just in answer to your question there, I mean, not necessarily give it the day job, but most of the blending for whiskey is all done by nose rather than taste. And it's interesting you should say that you managed to get it down to very similar to the nose on the 12. But yeah, no, it's always good fun playing around with a cask strength whiskey when you've got the thing to compare it to next to it. It's good parlor trick when folks come round. It looks like it makes people look like I know what I'm talking about when I'm doing that sort of process. So good fun. And I just want to say as well, both Stephen and Ian there, both in their Bunnahabhain branded t-shirts. I'm liking that. Stephen, you've obviously been to Feis Ile this year, because that's this year's t-shirt. Either that or someone's brought you it back. So congratulations. I hope you enjoyed yourself. It was a lovely sunny day as well. It was absolutely cracking. Really, really good.
Brilliant. No, that's fantastic. Excellent. So this one, as I say, is £88, and we do love a cask strength here. I didn't say it when we're talking about the 12. I'm always banging on in these calls about how all whiskey should be 46% by default, not necessarily cask strength by default, but 46%. And then you have the cask strength, and you're like, oh, feck, but maybe it should actually be just be cask strength. But yeah, definitely the love I mean, we were discussing when you were on for Deanston, the kind of the waxiness character, all the kind of the CVH brands If, you know, you can go in the Legic Tobermory. The mouthfeel is so much part of the experience, and that's always something I think is underappreciated within the whiskey tasting experience. People don't talk enough about the mouthfeel and the texture of whiskies. When I used to do whiskey presentations for a living, I used to always try and you know, kind of get people into being like, look, you know, your nose and the actual taste profile is important, but really the texture, don't forget the touch of the whiskey. And it's definitely, yeah, present on all of these. It's brilliant. Krista said incredibly smooth for cask strength, giving salted chocolate figs, superb. Brilliant. So you were mentioning Stephen and Ian's t-shirts. You might come on to the Feis Ile bottlings now, if you want. Or is there anything you wanted to touch on brand wise before that, Luke, in terms of the story of Bunnahabhain or anything?
It's a good segue right enough, so we'll come into that. But you were talking about mouthfeel, and you know, I was talking about before, you know, non-chill filtering and not adding color. You know, there is a legitimate reason why some people do chill filter their whiskies and do add coloring, and that is, you know, some markets, particularly Southeast Asia and America to an extent, expect consistency in color. Color is really important in some markets, not necessarily in the UK market and not necessarily in the European market. But what happens when you chill filter something, you do remove a huge amount of aspect of that mouthfeel that you were talking about. You know, we've got 3 distilleries that are so characteristic about their spirits and the way that they should feel in the mouth. I talked about that a lot at the start with Bunnahabhain. You've got that really sort of heavy, sweet, syrupy, sugary spirit almost. With Deanston, we talk about waxy and how it coats the inside of your mouth. When we talk about Tobermory and Leitchig, we talk about oily. And you know, I think that's, for me, it's half the experience. You know, it matters in the distribution of flavor across your taste buds, and you know, and I think it really adds to it. When you get a really thin whiskey, you start going into the realms of, you know, is this blended? Is this, you know, is this malt? Is this just blended Scotch or whatever? And I think you can tell, and I think it denotes quality as well. And I get emails every now and again from customers saying, "Oh, I've got 2 bottles of Deanston 12 here, and they're 2 different colors." And I just go, "But they taste exactly the same, right?" And they go, "Yeah." Says, well, it's not about the color, it's about the flavor. And whiskey is a natural product. In my mind, it should just be the spirit and the cask. Doing anything outside of that is a bit dubious sometimes. And it's done for commercial reasons or for spirit quality reasons. And particularly in markets where it's slightly warmer, sometimes whiskey can go cloudy if it's not chill filtered, because the oils expand a little bit and it makes it look cloudy. There's nothing wrong with the whiskey if you ever get a cloudy bottle of whiskey in a hot country. It's just the fact that it's non-chill filtered. So those aspects to level with, and that's a little bit of my nerdiness and my appreciation for whiskey is that, do you know what? Out the cask as best as possible. If you're adding water, great, fair enough, but don't chill filter it. Don't add any color to it. Let's have it as it's supposed to be.
No, totally agree. And there's a place for all sorts in the sense that that obviously the castrant market, or even probably the 46% market, it's niche. Like, you know, the vast majority, the over like something like 95% of whiskies consumed is, you know, Bell's and Jameson and stuff, mostly with a mixer in, you know, like something like, I can't remember the exact percentage, but I was talking to someone at Irish Distillers a while back, and it was like, they reckoned a huge, like 11% of all bottles of Jameson were consumed in nightclubs in Eastern Europe and mixed with ginger beer. Like, you know, it's like no one's sitting there and tasting that, and that serves its purpose. It's all whiskey, like, you know, they're not knocking that at all. But yeah, for what we are all on here to appreciate, you're dead right, Luke. So we'll come on to this to the Ruby podcast, will we?
We will indeed. So just a little bit about Feis Ile, I suppose, to start. During the pandemic, obviously, we couldn't hold the Feis Ile festival, and traditionally, Feis Ile releases from any distillery, not just Bunnahabhain, that is on Islay, were just exclusively available from the distillery. You had to turn up and get the whiskey from the distillery for those particular releases. During pandemic, we changed that slightly so that people could buy the whiskey online, or you could buy it from your local whiskey shop, either to, you know, support us as a distillery and support the local retailer. We made them available elsewhere apart from Islay. And this year, we have 2 releases that are available elsewhere from the island. But this is the last year that we're going to do Feis Ile releases that are going to be available out with the distillery. So next year, if you're looking for Feis Ile releases, you're gonna have to go to Islay. You don't have to go necessarily during the festival. You do if you want to get the like limited edition, like 100 bottle stuff that's only released on the day. But the other releases will be available from the distillery throughout various points of the year until they run out. So you've got two Feis Ile releases with us this evening. The first one is this year's release. Now, I said at the start, 97% of what Bunnahabhain does goes into Oloroso sherry. The one you're tasting here has not been in Oloroso sherry. It starts its life in bourbon cask, and then it is finished in a ruby port cask. Now, this was one of my favorites from Bunnahabhain's releases over the past few years. That's why it's here tonight. And I brought it for selfish reasons so that I get to taste it again. But this is just a little bit different. It's still distinctly Bunnahabhain in terms of its spirit characteristic, but in terms of the nose, in terms of the flavor, it's very, very different indeed. So on the nose, you're going to get those sort of slightly sharper sort of cherries and berries and forest fruits. And I do get a little bit of vanilla off there as well. And we are a slightly different nominated strength here. It's not cask strength, but it is 58.7%. So we're not far off that cask strength mark. And that's just been determined by our master blender. She's diluted it down just to where she thinks the sweet spot is. You can add a little bit of water to this. My personal opinion is I don't think this needs water to it, but you don't know until you try. I won't be adding water to mine, but I'm sure you chaps and chapettes will be adding water to yours just to have a wee go at it. But how we know and how we taste it, it's a very, very rich, interesting, distinctly Bunnahabhain in terms of spirit character, but totally different in terms of flavor profile. We're moving away from that sherry onto bourbon and port. For something that's 58.7%, I really don't think you get that huge alcohol hit from it. You know, I know you've just had a cask strength and we're going down 2 notches here, but I think you pick a little bit of that sort of biscuitiness from that bourbon cask, a little bit of vanilla, but then a little bit of those cherries in there as well. Port casks, for me, tend to be a little bit hit and miss, no matter what the distillery. I think we've absolutely nailed it with this one. This was my favorite of the Feis releases this year, and I really hope you get a chance to have a wee tasting and we enjoy it. And I'd love to hear your tasting notes on that one as well.
Yeah, definitely. And Frank D is quick in there. We're saying freshly polished wood on the nose. Stephen says rich and warm feeling when you taste this one. Bob says port finished or matured whiskey is my latest guilty pleasure. This is one banger of a dram. The interesting thing about port casks, they were almost industry pariahs for a long time. I remember speaking to someone. I think this is from an Irish context. I know everyone who comes to these calls is probably sick of me reverting back to Ireland all the time. But look, it's my background in whiskey. There was only I think one commercially available port finished whiskey in Irish whiskey come like 2017 or something. It was like just people didn't touch. I remember speaking to a very famous Irish master distiller once. I won't give away the name. He says there's never been a good whiskey produced in a port cask. And now they're just everywhere, and they're I love them. I think they're tremendous. That one whiskey, by the way, if anyone's wondering, was Palace Bar 12-year-old. It was actually independent bottling for a pub in Dublin, and it was like the only port cask. Like, you know, I think there was a few, maybe a couple of Bushmills and a few others that had port as an element of a wider blend, but it was the only one that was like presented as this is a port cask finished whiskey. But yeah, it's port cask is brilliant. Phil D says huge rich notes with fantastic depth of flavor, rich dates, question mark. That's what I try. That's what I aim for. That's the way to go. You know, get a bit of road frontage, marry into the money for the rich dates. But Frankie says cigar malts in a leather chair. So definitely more excellent tasting notes there, folks. I'll bring up the price on this. Can you remind us, Luke, what was in terms of volume, in terms of bottles available on this?
Oh, you're asking me now. So off the top of my head, I believe there was about 300 cases, so quite a bit of this one. What we've tended to do with these Feis Ile releases, and hence why we're stopping them, is make that the annual sort of limited releases for Bunnahabhain at the same time as, you know, making it a Feis Ile release. Hence why we're changing the situation. But this one is just sold like hotcakes, to be honest. This one's done really, really well. I couldn't say how much is left. I know there's an allocation set aside for you, Luke, for the whiskey shop.
My personal consumption, but
Personal consumption, and then obviously the whiskey shop's consumption on the side. But this one went down so well at the festival, and I've done a couple of tastings with this particular whiskey as well. And there is another freshly release, the triple sherry, which is a 22-year-old, which we don't have with us tonight, unfortunately, but it is available from the whiskey shop. That was in much smaller quantities, but again, Martin will tell me off for saying this. The port finish was getting much more sort of raves about it. Whilst the triple sherry was great, this was the one that people were kind of eyeballing and going, that is a little bit different, but still distinctly Bunnahabhain. And I think it's an absolutely fantastic release. And you do get a little bit of, and we don't talk about color too much, but you do get a little bit of the factor that it has been in a port cask, I think, from the hue that's on this dram. And I just think it looks beautiful, tastes beautiful, smells beautiful. And there's a reason why it's a crowd pleaser and one of my favorites.
Definitely. You mentioned about the tannin levels on the cask strength, saying that was one of the more tannic ends of the Bunnahabhain. Just added a drop of water to this, and affect me, it is like drinking a really dry red. It really kind of grabs you. It's a really interesting whiskey. Jeff says burnt oak and really long finish, gets more toffee at the end. Nick says definitely polished wood on this. One of the nose, as Frank said, really deep fruit flavor and a perfect balance. Really enjoying this one. Mel says blood orange, lots of fruit, blueberry cloves, then even a touch of strawberry aftertaste for me. Another great batch of tasting notes. Ian says I love the port cask whiskies, and this is no exception. Yeah, no, it's fantastic. The interesting thing, I mean, I actually don't know this, and maybe I'm hoping you do, Luke. So apologies for putting you on spot for something you don't know. So famously in sherry, with sherry casks, they're not actually, in almost every case, they're not really sherry casks. They're not Solera casks that actually produce the sherry there. They would have been historically transportation casks, fill the casks with sherry to ship them off to the UK, and then those transportation casks be reused as for whiskey. So the whiskey's been there, the sherry been there a few months and flavored the wood. It's not actually sat there. In terms of port, are these actual port casks? Are they what the industry standard is now in terms of sherry, in terms of seasoning them for a while and then using the sherry for sherry vinegar or something else? How does it work with port casks? Or is it more like a red wine cask type situation?
So port casks are a bit tricky. Port casks are tricky for the reason, especially Ruby Port, because any of you that have been to Porto and been to Gaia in Porto, where they store all the port and mature it there, is that Ruby port casks are absolutely massive. You know, you're talking sometimes 5,000, 10,000 liter casks, which are the same size as some of our washbacks. They just literally sit there, and they only get a few uses out of them for so many years. The way that this has worked, obviously, is that the casks then get broken down into staves at cooperages and then turned into obviously what we would call, hogsheads or something that sort of size, or the similar size to a sort of sherry butt. You do get some Ruby port casks that are the size of a sherry butt. In fact, it'll just be sherry casks that have been, instead of putting sherry in them, they've put port in them. But Ruby port is quite tricky. It's usually done in vast casks. And it's slightly different to tawny port, which is done in smaller casks, and white port as well. So there's so many different types of port and the way that port is mature, but traditionally Ruby port is done in absolutely massive cask. And don't ask me what the technical term is, because I know casks all have different names. Don't ask me what the technical term is for a port vessel, is probably the way to describe it. But yeah, it's quite complicated. But it's the cooperages that we rely on to rebuild those casks in a suitable format for us to be able to store and finish the whiskey in.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm trying to think. I was trying to think. I thought of a couple, but I'm not broadcastable. If a hogshead is this size, it's a what head for this? Like, is it a Harry Maguire head? I don't know. Is it a yeah, I don't know. Is it a Kardashian ass size cask? But yeah, I don't know. There's something there. We'll workshop that one and come back to it next time we have a port whiskey on.
The technical term is sherry butt.
Well, that's true. Yeah, sherry butt. Yeah. I think I might have said this one on the last thing, but I had a friend of mine who worked for a Middleton distillery, and they smell the the casks when they come in for any kind of mold or whatever. There's technical terms for it. There's this smell that it gives off if the cask has gone bad in transportation, basically. And whenever we were on nights out drinking, and people would be like, "Oh, what you do?" He goes, "Oh, I sniff butts for a living." I mean, technically, he was telling the truth, but yeah, here we go.
I've got a Labrador just sleeping down here that does exactly that. So don't worry.
There's less economic reward in what your lab that butts your lab sniffs though, like, you know.
That's not what he thinks.
Well, that's true. I suppose it's all relative. Chalice says, like my nan's fruitcake, which is great. This really is, and it gets more like that. I mean, I don't know what your nan's fruitcake tastes like now, Chad, but in general, in the concept of that and what I imagine it would taste like, it's gotten more like that for me. The longer it's sat in the glass, the longer we've sat with it, it develops kind of darker fruit notes over time. It's quite interesting. Chris says honey bourbon, port soaked leather. The great taste note. Ian says, are the casks too big to hold a whiskey without being broken down? As there is a size limit for manufacturing whiskies. So do they? Is what they're saying. So they're resizing these casks if they're using those larger casks. Luke.
So the big problem with using very, very large casks for whiskey is you don't get that much wood contact for the spirit. So this is why when you see whiskies that are in octaves or quarter casks tend to be really intensely flavored by the particular cask that they're in, and usually a lot of color comes out of them as well, because the smaller the cask, the more wood contact that the spirit gets. So the bigger the cask, the slower the maturation process is, the sort of lower the quality of that whiskey at the end of the day might be in terms of the flavors that it picks up from the cask. So it's also just practicality. You'll have all been to warehouses and seen whiskey casks and the way that they're stacked and the way that they're looked after, and just moving things around. Like port casks, they tend to be built almost in place and then filled up in the caves at Gaia, and it's yeah, it's a little bit more tricky. I mean, spirit's a lot more delicate than fortified wine.
Yeah. So they're almost like vats rather than actual casks.
Yeah, I mean, there is obviously maturation going on there, and but I don't, it's less to do with the oak and more to do with the maturation, as with any sort of wine situation.
It's a bit like red wine, where you're looking for in exhausted casks. They don't want
they don't want to impart too much oak into it, and I've not really had too many oaky ports. Is not a particular fan of that situation, because you just get vanilla, and I don't think that's what they're after with the port cask. We're after, in the whiskey world, the flavors that cask can impart into the spirit, and the best way to do that is to take that wood to a cooperage, turn it into the right size for us, and then use those casks as best we can.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Frank says, price of ruby port cask now as I require one. So what do you reckon they go for? Even those port pipes, let's say not a ruby cask, the big ones, but those kind of the port pipes you see in actual dunnage warehouses and that.
Yeah,
the market rate of them. You're in sales.
Gosh, it'll be quite pricey. For some sherry cask, just for comparison, you're looking at probably like 250 quid, 300, 500 quid, depending on the quality, depending on the type of sherry. Port's a little bit more scarce. You're probably in the £500-600 for the size of a sherry butt or something like that, or a port pipe or something like that. It's not cheap, at all. And not there's quite a lot in the sherry world. Not we're going to have, because we use pure Oloroso sherry, but other sherry whiskies are maybe just using casks that have been seasoned with sherry for a little period of time, and then the sherry's off to make vinegar afterwards. With port, we're not seeing that process. Port can only be made in Porto and matured in Gaia, and there's only limited space. There's only limited space in those warehouses and those caves there. So you've got to treat port a little bit different, and I think you've got to make the most of it when you do have it. So there is a reason for the price tag.
Yeah. Well, speaking of price tag, Bob has given the price of this, which I was about to do. It's 120 normally. So yeah, 102 with the discount you get at the end of the tasting. So thank you, Bob, for that. We'll move on from the port conversation, because I can see people falling asleep there. Like, if you came for the whiskey and they're getting an education on port, cask sizes. But as we do, I believe one of the reasons why port is actually, because the price of sherry, as in, I mean actual sherry, not sherry whiskey or the casks, is creeping up over the last few years because the demand has gone up since 2009. For the first time in like 40 years, there's been an uptick in demand for sherry worldwide. So the price of that is growing because the Solero stocks is hard to just like, they can't, a bit like whiskey, you can't just suddenly produce more sherry as easily as you can. Whereas port is actually going the opposite way in many regards, and I believe it's because the Indura in Port Porto in that area, they've had to push to protect the industry. The Portuguese government have said that a certain percentage of Douro Valley grapes have to go into port production because Portuguese red wine, full stop, has exploded worldwide, and it would make way more economic sense for a lot of these port producers to just start making more traditional, more red wine that you would get off a menu in your restaurant, the Douro Valley red wine. So it's now kind of protected, which also means that there's still loads of it there because they kind of have to put so many grapes into port production. And they've also had some bumpers years. I think can't remember the term of it. There's a term for when you declare a port vintage, a kind of a vintage year in terms of the grapes, and they used to be like one every 10 years, and I think there was like one every year from like 2011 till very recently. So
it's a really interesting. I know we're still talking about port, and we said we'd move on to whiskies again. But port is one of those ones where they decide the vintage. They just go, right, this year's a good vintage. We're putting that, and everyone they kind of like the port council almost, and just kind of go, this is what we're declaring as a good vintage this year. And you were talking about the Douro wines there. Portuguese wine is not a huge thing in the United Kingdom. It's getting bigger, but elsewhere in the world, it's some of the best regarded wine. And you'll always get a really good wine for a lot cheaper price, even in the UK. So do go and seek out some Douro wine. Absolutely fantastic. And keep drinking port, because that's when you get more port-based whiskies if we're doing that. I highly recommend. Anyway, are we moving on with the whiskey?
And then there's no particular brand of port you recommend. It's any port in the storm. Richard has said any chance of a white port matured Bunna? I think he have. Do you have one that you do on the cask on the warehouse tours? Is there a white port Bunna?
There is some white port casks in there. I know there's some at Deanston as well. Because I tried some a couple of months ago and I was just blown away by it again. White port is never really been big in the UK. It's meant to be served chilled, and it is absolutely fantastic. Great dessert wine. And it just imparts those really, really, really sweet flavors into a whiskey. So yeah, if you see them, pick them up. I believe there is some in cask at Bunna. We don't have any bottled as far as I'm aware at this moment in time. There is some bottled white port cask at Deanston if you're passing by. But yeah, it's a totally different game with white port. Same with sort of white wine finishes. You've got to deal with that slightly lighter, more delicate flavorings. Is that going to go into the whiskey? Is the whiskey going to hold up to it? That's where these heavy spirits from Bunnahabhain and Deanston actually work quite well. It needs to be heavy, it needs to be waxy, and you just really need to monitor it because you're not maturing in these things, you're finishing. And with finishing, it's almost trying every month just to make sure that it's at where we want it to be, and we don't want it to go past the point where it just doesn't taste great.
Yeah. No, perfect. Thanks for that answer to Richard's question. Bob says, with so much sherry whiskies out there and all distilleries claiming their barrels are the best, is there a risk to supply in the medium term, which will impact price or quality?
I think when we were talking maybe 5 years ago, there was a wee bit of a risk because there wasn't enough sherry casks kicking about for the amount of distilleries that were requesting sherry. And that's what I mentioned before, how there is some businesses that are just putting sherry in there for a little bit of time to season the casks, and then the sherry is taken out of them because the cask is worth more than the sherry. Those sherry casks have been bought by Scotch whisky distilleries. We've been very, very careful with Bunnahabhain, as you would expect, that we source high quality Oloroso sherry casks, and that is quite a difficult task to do, and we do pay the money for it. You'll have seen the consistency, and you're all still here, and you're all still drinking it. The Bunnahabhain 12 is a consistent product that we hold to very high standard, and I think some people are less careful about it because it's our signature. We've managed to keep hold of it, but yeah, there is a bit of tough fighting and commission and competition out there, and you'll have seen some rises in whiskey prices over the past 2 years, especially with inflation and things like that. We're quite lucky that's not coincided with further inflation on the price of sherry casks. We've just had to deal with His Majesty's Revenue and Customs taking a little bit more of their duty, and as well as the cost of goods of grain and things like that going up as well. So yeah, we're not here to compromise on quality. We'd much rather just keep it consistent, and we're trying to keep the price where it should be as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was reading, you mentioned the output for was it 2.2 million liters output for Bunna? There was a thing I was reading about 3 weeks ago about this is obviously, no idea what the actual cost behind something like Bunnahabhain is, but I think the average cost of running a 2 million liter distillery is 5.6 million, and that's before you ever sell a bottle. So if you're starting a distillery and you haven't got the liquid, you have the capital investment up front for all the equipment, plus that for 3 years before you can sell something, and then you're only going to sell so many quantities of your 3-year-old new first release or whatever, because people want it for the novelty, but they don't want to then the next year drink just a 4-year-old for the price you have to charge. And it's a very challenging market to operate in. So I know there has been a big inflation in cost of whiskey for the consumer in the last few years, but I think in most part it's a lot of it's driven by genuine economic necessity rather than crazy price gouging. But so we will come on to the next one, which is where have I put the little yoke? It's the Costanza cask, Costanza cask, Casta. What?
No, Canasta.
Canasta cask. My apologies.
Canasta cask. Yeah, so I think you're in for a wee treat with this one here, Luke, because Canasta is a very rare type of sherry. It's a blend of Oloroso and Pedro Jimenez that's then put into a secondary cask to mature together. You can use Moscatel as well instead of Pedro Jimenez. You've got the Oloroso, which is that kind of drier sherry, blending it with a sweeter sherry that is Pedro Jimenez or Moscatel. For a second maturation. And what you have here is a full Canasta maturation. This is not finish. And this was last year's Feis Ile release as well. Canasta whiskies tend to be very, very expensive, tend to be very, very old, because they are expensive casks, and they obviously want to get the best value they possibly can out of purchasing those casks, and then the whiskey that comes out at the end of the day. The most famous Canasta cask from Bunnahabhain is actually our 1980 Canasta, and if you've been privileged enough and wealthy enough to try such a thing, you'll understand the basis of what a Canasta cask is all about. But Julianne, our master blender last year, decided she wanted to release a non-age statement Canasta matured whiskey, so that everyone who appreciates whiskey can do so at an affordable price and get to see what it means to put the creme de la creme of sherry casks with Bunnahabhain. We're famous for our sherry casks and the sherried whiskies that we do, and this was meant to be just the shining example of what it's supposed to be in terms of Canasta as well. So this one here is absolutely fantastic in terms of its nose. You're going to get a little bit of this sort of vanilla and a little bit of cream off it, as well as those sort of sweeter toffee notes in there too. Everyone else will have their own tasting notes, a little bit of strawberry in there too, I think, as well. And then to taste, the first thing that I kind of got off it was a slightly fruitier notes. And I watched it in the chat, actually, somebody else who said strawberries and cream as well. But I think it kind of moves into that kind of vanilla ice cream and a little bit of the sort of sticky toffee pudding realms as well. And it does have a tremendous mouthfeel to it. And it is coming in at 51.2%, but it doesn't taste anything near that. I think the alcohol coverage there by the Canasta cask is brilliant. It's a very, very smooth whiskey, and it's a nominated strength. It's not cask strength. You can again add water to this one. I don't, because I've had the opportunity to do so, but do give it a wee try. I think it's so full bodied at this strength, and you're getting such a rare insight to Canasta casks. They're a lot sweeter than those Oloroso casks that we're talking about before. Oloroso is a dry sherry. This has been blended with Pedro Jimenez or Moscatel with Oloroso, and I think it really is reflected in the whiskey as we come across it. In terms of age statement, there is no age statement on this. 8 years, but we've decided just to kind of go with the flavor profile than worrying about how old it is.
Yeah, no, brilliantly. And it really works. I mean, it's a phenomenal whiskey. It actually is, yeah, it's the bee's knees from what we've tried so far. And I think this is people are agreeing with in the chat. Ian says this is my joint favorite whiskey of last year. I was buying the distillery only Amarone until I tried this, and then bought a small Amarone in a full size Canasta. So creamy, strawberries and cream for me, which was the tasting you've already referenced. Martin says, love this, dangerously smooth for over 50%. This could disappear very quickly. Jeff said, this is Bunna on another level. Ian says, vanilla ice cream instead of cream is most better note. So Phil says,
You agree?
Yeah, I agree, Ian. Yeah. Phil says, very fruity with a full-on toffee ice cream note. And Nick says, that's just naughty. Definitely getting sticky toffee pudding. Cracker, perfect dessert whiskey. Did you say, I know this is a non-age statement. Did you say, sorry, apologies if you said this, Luke, but did you say how long this actually is matured for? Or
It's roughly about 8 years. There'll obviously be some slightly older stuff in there as well, but I do think the youngest whiskey that's in here will be 8 years, and this is stuff that's on its way to being, the next old Canasta release from Bunnahabhain, and you can't just put any whiskey in Canasta Car. You've got to put, again, I've talked about it a couple of times now, that sort of heavier spirits in there. A light spirit would just get lost in this. It would be super, super sweet and super oaked with that Canasta cask, but. Yeah, we're hovering around that sort of younger age statement for this particular whiskey, and you can see how it's picked up the color, it's picked up the flavor. It's just someone has said it was on Bunnahabhain on another level, and I think they're right. It's what happens when you get like the gold star product of what a Bunnahabhain should be in terms of a sherried, unpeated Islay whiskey.
Yeah, no, totally. And Mel has said this is the most savory whiskey tonight for me. Earthy, walnuts, tobacco, coffee, dark chocolate, orange peel. I could sip this all night. Mel's been on form with the tasting notes tonight. And yeah, totally agree. And this is, I mean, the podcast is gorgeous. This is actually cheaper. It comes in at 108. It's £91.80 with the discount. So that's a bargain for you there if you're picking up a bottle after the tasting. No, brilliant. And did you say, so apologies again if you've said this already, but the volume in terms of this release?
So I think this was about 4,000 bottles, so it's quite a big release, but it's gone down quite well. Obviously we're a year into it now, but it's just about getting the awareness out of there, because this is the problem with these Feis Ile releases, that only people in the island tend to learn about them until I come on here and have a chat about them. So hopefully this will help the numbers a little bit. But at the same time, I just think it's you're getting a bargain at 91 quid for a start. I think the original price that we had it out at was £120 on the day, or something along those lines. So yeah, it's just one of those whiskies that they've done a good job of and done plenty of.
No, definitely. There was someone could remind me in the chat. I'm just going to check it up here. This actually reminds me of not in whole. I think actually this is a very different whiskey, but there's elements of this that remind me of the STR cask finish we did in the Feis Ile base. But anyone who was on that tasting, because that was an STR where the cask was it a sherry cask that went through the STR treatment? But there's a lot of similar notes, especially in some of the notes that Mel picked up in terms of earthy, walnuts, tobacco, and that was the clear winner on that night's tasting. Everyone was like, yeah, that one was the bee's knees. Not everyone, it actually wasn't, but it was the majority, but not quite everyone. But yeah, so no, it's interesting. It's yeah, like as I say on Mel's notes, the dark chocolate orange. Totally agree.
Tremendous tasty notes as well. I mean, that dark chocolate and the orange in particular is something I definitely pick up on the sort of the finish with this whiskey. And this one's always a crowd pleaser. I love taking this to tastings because people just go, oh yeah, okay, that's next level. But I think tonight's competition will actually be probably between this and the Ruby Port. But I told you to keep hold of a wee bit of Bunna 12 if you've all managed not to drink all of it. Do go back to it and just kind of reset yourself and come back to those whiskies, and you'll see what I mean about that long finish with Bunnahabhain. You get that. I call it the har, that kind of like Bunnahabhain fog at the back of your mouth, just kind of sitting there for quite a long time. There's long finishes. That's where I tend to pick up those like kind of dark chocolates and sort of really malty notes to it. And this one in particular, I think, just really sits there quite well and sits there for a very long time indeed.
Mm-hmm. No, totally agree. Remind us again, just out of curiosity, because I'm just interested in Richard has obviously said this was the perfect dessert wine there in the chat, but Mel's called it the most savoury whiskey tonight. In terms of your decision on the running order, why did you think the port was the one to go before this? Because they're two phenomenal whiskies, but they're Bunna from two very different angles.
I think my reasoning behind that was that we'd just done a cask strength. And I just thought the port might just hold up a little bit better against the cask strength in this. The Canasta is a little bit more delicate. There's a little bit less alcohol in it, and the Ruby is a little bit more, but it's less than the cask strength. So I was kind of thinking about it in alcohol terms, but also just if you're going from that cask strength into cherries and berries with the port cask, you're bringing yourself back down again on the alcohol terms. You can maybe pick up those slightly fruitier flavors and then back into something nice and mellow and sweet compared to what we're going to be trying next, which is going to be peated. So that was my thought.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. It wasn't a
you had them the other way around, didn't you?
Just trying to get the idea. Yeah. No, definitely.
I thought we'd go port before we go back to sherry. That was the thought.
Yeah.
And that's why I said to keep hold of the 12 and just do side by side, because that 12 is what keeps the lights on at Bunnahabhain. That's great. We need to do that perfectly every single time, and then we've got the fun stuff after that as well. Not that Bunnahabhain 12 isn't fun, but you've just got something to compare it with and have a wee nose, and that's the thought process anyway.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. We've got Alistair in there said he had them the other way around. Apologies if that was confusion on our end, Alistair, but I hope you enjoyed them the other way around. Speaking of which, we come on to the final dram of the night. Try this Teach A Dha. I learned Irish in school, which is obviously a sister language to Scots Gaelic. Learned Gaelic in school for my entire life, and I can't pronounce the name of this. So I hear Bunnahabhain, no challenge to me. The BH is a V. It makes perfect sense. This just, I don't know, just doesn't. It just my brain cannot compute it.
So I'm not used to this either. I'm from Orkney originally, and we don't speak Gaelic up there. We're much more Scandinavian in our way of talking and lyrical speaking. So I do struggle with these things, and I have to go to Islay and ask the guys at the distillery, what does that actually mean? Even though they're not the guys that have named it, it's been some sort of marketing committee somewhere else in Glasgow that has decided the names of these things. But part of the fun of working for Bunnahabhain is that you do get these wonderful Gaelic names, which I think is part of the fun with these particular whiskies. Toiteach A Dha. Toiteach A Dha is one of the ways of saying smoky. There's lots of different ways of saying smoky or peaty in Scots Gaelic. As you can imagine, on Islay, there's very many different terms and phrases and words that mean smoky. Just some of them are moine, is usually what you hear from Bunnahabhain when it comes to peated whiskey. Toiteach, the original Toiteach, which just means smoky. Toiteach A Dha means smoky again. So this is the second iteration of Toiteach. We also have Stoisha, which is traditionally used by independent bottlers for peated Bunnahabhain. We do have this year a bottle on site, Feis Ile release that was Stoisha. And then we have Pukvona, which means peat stack, which is the travel retail Bunnahabhain peated. So there's so many words and so many different phrases, and all of them completely unpronounceable and readable at the same time. So it's all part of the fun. Like I said, most of what we do at Bunnahabhain is unpeated, heavily sherried. We do some peated whiskey, and we do it because it is part of the tradition of the island. The reason why everything on Islay is peated is the way that you would dry your malt would be obviously heating it in some capacity. You'll notice if you've ever been to Islay, there's not many trees. So you can't burn trees, but you can burn peat. And that's why Islay whiskies are peated. They are traditionally dried malt using the peat in the ground rather than the few trees that they do have, if they did manage to grow them at all. Too windy for trees. So with this particular whiskey, you're actually starting and finishing in bourbon casks. You can just almost kind of see it's a lot more sort of golden straw color to it. It's not that sort of traditional Oloroso sort of russet gold that we get with the 12-year-old. It's a very similar aged whiskey to the 12-year-old, slightly younger. It's a non-age statement. And you are going to get a little bit of peat to it. But when we talk about that peat, it's not the sort of traditional Islay peat that we're going for. It's Islay sort of medicinal TCP, scientific peat, I would call it. It's more sort of a campfire. We hover around the sort of 45, 46 ppm, just because that fits the characteristics of what we're doing. We also use the same sort of malt and the same sort of peat. There's a little bit of Islay peat in there, not a lot, but a little bit of Islay peat for Leitchig from Tobermory. But with this, you're going to get that heavier spirit. It's still Bunnahabhain in terms of its characteristic and the way it sits, but it is really quite peaty. Even at that 45 ppm, it's not in that 200s, 300s you get from some of the other Islay malts, but it does, stick around quite a bit in a campfire type of way. Again, marketing will appreciate me saying this. When you've been sat by a campfire and you smell your clothes afterwards, that rather than roasting straight over the top of it. Again, don't tell marketing about any of that.
No, definitely. Ian says, I agree. I would say it's more like a Highland peat, where it is more smoky. In terms of your distillery output for peated whiskey, what's the breakdown as a percentage or just a rough idea? And how many months of the year do you distill the peat?
So I think we just do I think it's 5 distillations of peated whiskey. So you're probably talking about 2 weeks there, and we do it just after obviously the close down period where we're cleaning everything. Sorry, just before we do that, right enough, we finish up the malt unpeated, and then we do the last few sessions as peated stuff, and then everything gets cleaned again, and we're back onto unpeated malt. So it's probably about 1-2%, if that. And most of that stuff is probably going into Moynia. Moynia releases tend to be small releases, tend to be distillery releases. Those of you that are part of the Coterie, which is the whiskey club for Bunnahabhain, will have access to more of those than even I do. Working in the UK, doing pubs, bars, restaurants, off trade, all that sort of stuff. And this is just a staple, a core range Bunnahabhain for those that like that kind of peated movement towards it. It's a little bit meaty, and just a little bit different. It's proof that Bunnahabhain has a versatility, whether it's peated or unpeated. But we prefer to stick that unpeated memo, but we still need to be able to produce a peated whiskey for Islay. And I think we make a great example of that with Toiteach A Dha.
Yeah, no, definitely. And Stuart has asked us, Toiteach A Dha, pronounced Tok Akaga, come from Monet, like the original Toiteach. Or
Toiteach A Dha come from Moynia, like the original. Yeah, so when we talk about peated spirit, Scapa, Andrew, is the answer. Sorry, somebody sent me a direct message saying Scapa or Highland Park. Toiteach A Dha will be some Moynia peated spirit, but actually Moynia tends to go into sherry casks. Toiteach A Dha is slightly different. It's going into bourbon. So when we're working with this particular spirits, we do try and keep some sort of name separation with it. And that allows us to, A, try and keep it simple on our side, and B, try and give these things a little bit of distinct sort of reference for themselves. Moynia would be sort of heavier, sherried, peated whiskey from Bunnahabhain. Toiteach A Dha, stable, slightly different, but still Bunnahabhain spirit characteristic.
Yeah, brilliant. And I'll just confirm the old price and discount on this. So we're looking at 56. Yeah, before the discount. So with the discount, that is 47.60. So perfect. So yeah, I suppose that's the. I mean, if anyone's got any more comments on that, please. Or if there's anything else you want to share, Luke, please do get them in the chat. Ian says, "Are you on Insta, Luke?"
I am whiskey and rugby on Instagram. I will post that in the chat so that everyone can see.
Marvelous. No, that's excellent. And so now this is normally the point of the night where people put in the chat what their preference was. So please do tell us what your in order your kind of your favorite to your least favorite. Martin says would see this as a great intro to peat. It's a nice sweet / smoky balance, but doesn't smack you in the face either. Totally agree. I mean, I think it's you were saying about the ppm levels. I mean, I love peat, so I'd go for anything. But this is still, even you were saying 45. I mean, this still to me is more on the peated end compared to some of the kind of more, because you do get those ones knocking about with 15, 20 ppm. Your neighbours Ardnahoe, their kind of latest release, which is I think is a blend of peated and unpeated, has a is more subtle. So I just mean that in terms of an introduction to peat. I think there's smaller steps if you wanted to really go on that scale. But that's an observation rather than a criticism.
I think it's about making a wee bit of a statement without making an overstatement.
Yeah.
That's probably the way that the teams looked at it and just gone, we are on Islay. It does have to be a little bit peaty if we are going to do a peated whiskey. And as I said, it's actually very different to the sort of higher end Moyniers and more expensive
Totally,
peated Bunnahabhains that we do. The fact that we only do what sort of 1-2% a year peated whiskey that we managed to squeeze in Toiteach A Dha and have it at the price that it is just almost like a nodding of respect to the heritage that is Islay, a heritage that is peated whiskey. And Bunnahabhain, yes, we'd like to be known for not that, but I think we'd be criminal if we didn't do one on that particular island.
Yeah, no, totally. And there's a few distilleries nowadays doing the kind of not necessarily to the extremes you are in terms of only the 2% output, but the they're kind of producing both spirits. I think Kilcoman do, obviously you mentioned Ardnahoe. There's a couple of others that are doing non-peated whiskey. Are there a couple of others? I believe they are who are also doing non-peated.
Bruichladdich, obviously.
Bruichladdich, of course, yeah, of course, yeah.
But Bruichladdich has done a very distinct and interesting project with that. They've got the Bruichladdich side, and they've got the Port Charlotte side and the Octomore side.
Yeah.
They've gone heavy into the peat side of it, and Bruichladdich keeping the lights on. That's probably the way I describe it. In the same way that we do Bunnahabhain 12 and Styradare, to keep Bunnahabhain's lights on, and then the more interesting stuff within a different brand. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when you think about Islay and you think about unpeated whiskey, I'd like to think that people do think Bunnahabhain, because that is our main focus. Bruichladdich, their main focus is perhaps Port Charlotte and Octomore. But at the same time, we're all in the same community, we're all in the same space, we're all making great whiskey. And it's nice to be the guys that people come up to and go, you know what? We're the last day of the festival, because everyone's had too much peat on Feis Ile, and they just go, oh, right, great, we've got Bunnahabhain, we've got a nice sweet sherry today, and we can go and enjoy something that's maybe not necessarily peated and the sort of get involved in the whole spirit of Islay. So yeah, it's an interesting position to be in with Bunnahabhain.
No, definitely. Definitely. So the results are in. We must tally them now. This is the more important election going on this week, or next week, or the next couple of weeks. I don't know. That joke.
6 days more nonsense. That's what we gotta
do. So we've got Stephen says 4-3-2-5-1. So that would be the Sherry Feis Ile, the
Canasta,
yeah. And then then the port, which is kind of the Castron. So that's kind of the order you predicted earlier on, Luke. We've got Bob said 3, so he's got the port first 4-2-1-5. Claire and Ian said 4-2-3-1-5. Chaz says favourites are both Feis Iles 100%. Chris says the 12-year-old is number 5, and then his winner is the Ruby Cask. Alistair's gone 3-4-2-5-1-5. I think the Port Cask might be winning here. The Costanza for Ian. No, maybe, yeah, that's a close one actually. I think, and the more I scroll down, the more the Costanza, yeah, I think by the end is actually Costanza probably a clear winner. But yeah, that's an interesting one. There's definitely a few one. Christian's actually gone with the 12 as his number one. So that's interesting. Chad says my wife
That was a
doesn't
great
like
endorsement for the 12.
Yeah, no, that is,
And
yeah. Christian says Chad says my wife doesn't like peated whiskey, but she may like the Toiteach A Dha. Lisa's 4531. So yeah, there's some interesting ones there. The code I put in the chat there, lads, or folks, they mean to gender it, was WS24BN. That's the code that will get you 15% off all the whiskies we tried here tonight. If you go back to the original product page, you can actually link to all of them from there. But if you obviously you can search on the website as well, more directly. Nick has wished happy birthday to Jeff. Is there a comment there that I missed about Jeff's birthday? Happy birthday, Jeff. From all of us at the W Club and from everyone at CVH, I'm sure, Luke.
happy birthday indeed.
Phil says the website says Ruby Port not available online. Is that correct? It was available online for me when I was price checking only a few minutes ago.
Sold it out immediately. That's what's happened.
That potentially was because to let that wow, it actually looks like it has.
It actually has. Yeah, I can
to
see
lift the
that.
curtain.
Yeah.
When I say, oh, this is the price and this is the discount, I normally just put the code in myself on the website and see what the basket discounts, and that's what I did with the Ruby Port earlier on. So yeah, with that was
I'll
out.
get some dispatched to you tomorrow, Luke. Immediately.
We'll get it back in stock. Yeah, thanks, Luke.
Yeah.
Do sort that out. And yeah, we'll sort that out for you. So apologies, folks, anyone looking to buy that, but we'll be emailing you tomorrow with the discount again and the recording. So we'll make sure to give you a time frame on getting that back in stock once we do that. And also, if you're looking to purchase the Ruby Port and another one, don't hold off. Just purchase the ones you were going to purchase now because it's free shipping anyway if you're a W Club member. So you're not gonna to miss out, but you'll get the other ones a bit quicker. So yeah, don't wait. Pull the trigger now, folks. Frankly, this is great tasting, but expected with the Bunna one. Totally agree. And for Bernie, I'm just going to repeat the code and put in the chat again. It's WS24BN is the code there, folks. So, Luke, is there anything else you wanted to share with us before we finish?
Do you know what? I do love imparting some secrets to folks that come along to W Club tastings, as you know. And there's some, as I said, there's no Feis Ile releases next year. This year's releases will come slightly earlier, around about the sort of September, October time. The things to watch out for, and don't show the recording to the rest of the business. We do have a new core release range coming out, which is going to be a 15-year-old Bunnahabhain. I can't share any more than that age statement and name and casks or anything like that at this point. And there will also be, you may have seen it on some of the Bunnahabhain social media, Facebook groups and things like that. There is a 21-year-old cask strength coming out as well, which I've yet to taste either of these products, but I know I'm biased, but I genuinely haven't tasted a bad Bunnahabhain to go with it. And I'm sure it'll be absolutely fantastic. And Julianne and her team, who are doing the blending these days, are doing a cracking job of what they're meant to be doing with the spirits. And if anyone's got any comments or questions after this, please do add me on Instagram and ask away. It's both my personal and professional Instagram, so apologies for any politics that you see on there for the next 6 days. Everyone go and vote. Make sure you do. But it was actually really honestly amazing to see that Luke was telling me just before we started this evening that the Bunnahabhain tasting sold out within 48 hours, and that's all just to see me.
I think it was more like 4 or 8 hours rather than
4 or 8 hours. There you go. And I appreciate it's Bunnahabhain, and we're doing our best to look after the distillery and do what we're doing. And all feedback is welcome. We're trying to keep it nice and real and on the level in terms of our pricing, and we're trying to keep the spirits up there as well. But Hopefully I'll be back sometime soon. Luke will hopefully have me back. He's had me back 3 times now. With Deanston and Tobermory. And who knows, we might have to venture into Black Bottle at some point as well. Because a lot of Bunnahabhain in Black Bottle as well. So for those of you that are looking for a blend, please do go and indulge yourselves. But again, thanks very much for having me. Unless there's any other questions anyone's got, it was an absolute pleasure.
No, thank you, Luke, for coming in. There's a couple of great comments in there, people thanking us tonight, so that's brilliant. Thank you for joining us, Luke, and making providing the stock and making this an amazing tasting. We had a question there about the Heaven's Door. It shouldn't be out. It was working fine for me today. That one hasn't sold as quick as the Bunna, so there's still yeah, there's at least 34 packs of that left in stock on the site for me. But if you're still having trouble checking out with it, just email me at luke@whiskyshop.com and we'll try and sort that, because it's definitely in stock. But brilliant. So folks, for anyone who hasn't picked up a pack, our next tasting is next Thursday, Heaven's Door, Bob Dylan's whiskey, on Independence Day. So, you know, where else would you want to be doing on a Thursday night? So do join us. If you want, Luke, you can join us as well. I think I've taken off your ability to unmute yourself, but we'll send you a pack.
No, I would honestly look forward to it because there's nothing else happening that day really that's of any importance. So we might have to just jump on, because there's no actual news until 10 o'clock on Thursday next week. So why not?
Well, exactly. Yeah, and that's the perfect way. Then you're going in after a few drinks to kind of see what's. Oh, we all know what's going to happen. But yeah, although I haven't. I'm probably sure I do follow you on Instagram, but I haven't seen. Maybe what kind of, maybe you're a big Rishi Sunak fan. So we'll see. We can discuss that offline. But
not with the taxes that man has put on whiskey, shall we say? That's all I'm going to say on that matter.
Perfect. Well, Mel, I'll look into what Mel's saying now about still not being able to check out the Heaven's Door. We'll definitely have a look at that, because obviously that needs to be sorted. We want that tasting to sell out. So thank you for raising that, Mel, and thanks everyone for joining us, and hopefully see you again next Thursday. Cheers, folks. And that discount code for the one last time, WS24 BN. So we'll see you, folks. Bye. Thanks, Luke.